result of that, they realised what they had as a group.
But Muse were not finished yet. The overwhelming success of Absolution around the world had meant the band now had license to explore their potential even further, venturing into new sonic textures and expanding their themes and lyrical content. The following year, they returned to the studio and in July 2006 released the triumphant Black Holes and Revelations, which was to go on and become their most successful album to date.
They disembarked to a haunted chateau in France and sat there for 2 months with no contact with the outside world whatsoever, and talked about the apocalypse. Grew beards and got quite dark for 2 months. And they made a record there which they didn't really understand. It was sort of these massive, great jazz workouts that just seemed to sprawl over, and they couldn't get their heads around it. They'd just jam away, and they'd have these jazz side projects and play their songs as jazz bands, and it was an unformed mass of stuff they came out with, so that needed focusing, and then they ended up in New York, which saved the record and made it to the brilliant record it is today.
When the album was being promoted, I was desperate to get a copy of it. So we were sent the album on headphones that wrapped around the back of your head, and you had a little switch inside the headphones that you could play it on. Obviously futuristic, slightly weird, dystopian. I loved it. So I'd be sitting on a bus listening to this insane music. You know, it was, you'd be sitting on the back of a Routemaster's, I think that we still had then, listening to this heavy, strange sound. Supermassive Black Hole, I remember hearing that and going, what is this?
Taking a song like Supermassive Black Holes, which they just simply didn't know what to do with in its form from the chateau in France, suddenly had this sort of funky sort of elements to it that they got from New York, and suddenly they had a brilliant fusion. It's just a song which has vocal experimentation all over it. I mean, the actual chorus being, which I'm not sure, I think Chris might even have sung, or certainly does live, of really distorted vocals. So I think it just comes across as a fun experimental pop track.
Supermassive Black Hole demonstrated Muse's willingness to expand upon their sound by mixing R&B rhythms, alternative guitar and electronica. As the lead single from Black Holes and Revelations, it also went on to be their highest charting release to date, reaching number 4 in the UK.
With Black Holes, they, as with Absolution, I think they sort of looked at what they'd done before and realised that what they were doing worked, and following their instincts and making stuff as big and pompous and wild and crazy as they can.
Black Holes and Revelations is like a big, fantastic space opera. That's what it is. It does take you on a journey, you know, like the best kind of concept albums do. I think it's very brave that Muse kind of almost brought back the idea of the concept album when it was possibly the naffest idea ever. It just showed that they didn't care. They're like, we can do this, and we don't care about what's cool and what's not cool. We're just going to do something.
Yeah, Black Holes was I agree with that, and I could, you know, you could see the whole thing performed as a musical, couldn't you? As a, not in a, I hate musicals, not in that nasty way, but in a kind of rock opera kind of aspect of it. Whenever you say things like that, it always still sounds a bit like prog rock opera. It always has this 70s kiss of death about it.
They really felt as though they could experiment here, and they really wanted to follow their instincts. So you do have electronica on the likes of Map de Problématique, and you've got this massive, great Night of Cydonia, sort of, you know, the most prog track they've done to date.
Night of Cydonia, the title in itself, you know, what is that? Kind of, where is Cydonia? Nights, you know, kind of, nobody talks about nights anymore.
Any real successful band, you know, I think it's that mixture of, you know, having a laugh, but, you know, playing the music and getting it right, honing the music, but with, you know, it's not it's not a 9-to-5 job, you know, where you have to wear a shirt and tie.
In the video, you see the band in the video, they obviously are having a fantastic laugh in the video, and I don't think there's anything wrong with music that makes you smile and makes you laugh.
Nights of Cydonia video, I thought it kind of went to the one end of the spectrum that is at my least comfortable. You know, that kind of, I mean, it's rock pomposity into kind of quite over the top kind of gay cowboy vibe going on. And I think it worked, but it's not the kind of thing that I would make.
Matt was always saying, even from the early days, that he wanted to do a track that had a 15-minute guitar solo on it. And when they came up with that, I thought, well, this is it then. This is their big prog track. And to put it out, they put it out as the first single in America, and they started shows with it. And it was literally, this is what it is, take it or leave it, deal with this. And people absolutely adored it.
Black Hole's Revelations was a massive breakthrough in terms of their international, you know, status and reputation. Obviously gained them a foothold in America, and the next year they played in Wembley, you know, in the 2 massive stadium gigs. It's funny that that is the record that made them accepted, almost as if people went, we can't believe that they keep building on their sound with each record, because the previous records are just as commercial, they're just as catchy, they're just as radio friendly. Black Hole's Revelations is almost a little less so in some ways, because it is heavy, because it is throwing these strange ideas about space and paranoia, and, you know, taking them to an even more intense place. But in some ways it's really fantastic that that is the album that took them there, almost that people started thinking, well, we do believe them now. We know that they really mean this, because they've, you know, there's almost a thought that they can't take this further. This is brilliant. This is the, you know, the apex of what they're going to do. But obviously we'd find out later that they would take their sound even further again.
The supporting tour in 2007 not only took in 2 sold-out nights at the new Wembley Stadium, but also multiple sold-out nights at stadia around the world. Having already wowed crowds with their previous shows, this proved to be one of their most ambitious, featuring a giant stage set, light show and acrobats. Keeping in tradition with their previous tours, the event was released as a live album and DVD the following year, known as the Harp Tour. Having played extensively throughout 2007 and most of 2008, Muse returned to the studio to record their 5th album, The Resistance. It was to be a record that would take the idea of their sound even further, and also would be the first album that the band would produce themselves.
Matt had been building this studio at his house in Italy for quite some time. They were supposed to do Black Holes and Revelations in it, but it wasn't ready in time. So this is the first album that they've made there. They also did some recording down in Devon, I believe. And they produced it. So it is very much, this is the first, even though they've always been very hands-on with the production of their records, this is the first one that is completely their work.
I interviewed Muse back in the summer, and you know, they were talking about how much they loved working with John Leckie, they were talking about how much they loved working with Rich Costey, but they'd got to a point in their career that they had to do something that shook them up a bit, that made them do something new. So they thought, I know what we'll do. We'll record an album ourselves, we'll produce it, and we'll try not to rein ourselves in. We'll just say, let's put in all this stuff, and if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, at least we've tried it.
And it's interesting what they've come out with, because it's since Origin of Symmetry, I think it's the first record of 2 halves, properly 2 halves, in that, and 2 quite stark halves, in that you've got the real sort of big, epic, you know, massive tune, well, not even tunes necessarily, but, you know, symphonies, if you like. There's a whole sort of symphonic sort of movement on it towards the end. The last 3 tracks are you know, a whole chunk of a record. Compared to possibly what their most pop-sounding records, their most sort of polished, chart-worthy songs. So